Melodious and Voiceless Voice actually making a huge appearance out here. The tale of the little Melodious deck that could. Make sure you guys smash the like and crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. So in celebration of Refined Gaming's multiple year anniversary out here, they celebrated free events for the entirety of January out here. And they kicked things off this previous weekend with a double header free case tournament for Supreme Darkness. You know, stores don't have to do this, but they love to support their communities. And both of these case tournaments ended up capping, which is absolutely amazing. Now, your breakdown for the 7 p.m. Now, keep in mind, both of these events extremely competitive in terms of what you were seeing. Now, this event was a little bit different from the first. Obviously, you still have Fiendsmith Rizal sitting up here at the top, kind of waving, you know, doing its thing out here. But you also had a Mitsurugi Rizal deck still also sitting down here. Now, obviously, we don't have some of these lists because a couple people wanted to keep these lists quiet for the upcoming YCS, and we will respect that. You know, I don't have access to these, but what I can tell you is what we saw in the breakdown, give you some ideas of to see some of the challengers out here for the upcoming YCS, kind of give you a little bit of an idea of going, you know, interesting. So how can this deck compete here as well? So 4 Rizal variations out here. Yeah, that's a pretty clear indicator that Rizal is still rising to the occasion out here. I know, I had to get that out of my system. But you know what? That's okay. It does kind of show that, you know, if you're sitting in a very heavy location with all this madness. Okay, now we had the Fiendsmith Primite deck showing up again, which means the double success for that. And I do want to look at that again because I think it's very important that you understand why this deck and how this deck is performing and doing so well right now. Now, we also had a Kashtira Fiendsmith pile as well, which I'm not all that surprised to see that variant's kind of sticking around and doing well. I mean, Kashtira in combination with Fiendsmith cards, like, that's any mid-tier deck's worst nightmare of things to be seeing. We also have this Voiceless Voice deck showing up out here, and I gotta give that some credit, actually. That's an incredibly interesting thing to see. You know, I know a few people are like, Voiceless Voice, yeah, I know, but the thing that caught my attention the most here was Melodious, and people not really understanding how to fundamentally play against this deck. Also, Power Sync Stone is an incredibly broken card. Power Sync Stone, been seeing a lot of play. You shouldn't underestimate that. Let's pass on over to deck list. Make sure you get smashed. Oh, you already done that. Okay, well, I just wanted to remind you. Okay, so we've got our Melodious pile for you here. Now, if you're rushing out here, you know, you're like, oh my gosh, Robbie said Melodious is... No. Chill out. This was a very good call against the meta because you have some stupid extra deck options down here. This thing taking away your opponent's graveyard means you're going to be forcing Fiendsmith cards out, or at least shaving down those resources from your opponent. And of course, let's call it what it is. I mean, this deck, its whole job is to just throw big walls at the opponent. And the bounceability on this card is a little bit more than some decks can handle. Now, you're not going to win every single event you're going to be rushing out trying to play this deck. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying is when the stars align, you actually have some decent matchups out here. Cover your ground. We're also playing the Tam Tam out here, getting the ability to ping for some 500 damage is freaking hilarious. And it's for our time procedures. Then there's this stone. Or this card. Power Sync Stone, back at it again out here, kind of showcasing some of the, I'm going to say the incredibly good power that you actually get out here. Basically, being able to put the first marker on this means that your opponent's not really going to get the chance to play the game. And that's incredibly good. You really want this card to be that aid for you and assisting you in taking down those more troublesome matchups. Do not underestimate this card. I have seen some really, really bad decision making, being like, oh, Melodious won't bring this card in. Yeah, you can bet your sweet bippy they will. All right, next up here, we have Fiendsmith Rizal. Yum. What's this doing here? So I see that what I'm assuming is through the course of the weekend's adventure out here, that they were just kind of getting, you know, frustrated with dealing with some of the more strong meta out here. So we went ahead and we said, you know what, screw this. We're going to put an Ultimate Slayer into our deck, and we're going to use this to kind of clear up some of those more problematic things. I mean, hey, look, you got all of your bases covered down here for what you want to be seeing for this Ultimate Slayer. So having the Ultimate Slayer resolve is going to be just fine. You've also got the additional copy down here as well to kind of be helping you out. Also, there's only one thrust in this build, which I don't know how I feel about that. You were playing a Slayer in the main, and you're playing a Slayer in the side, but you only chose to main one thrust. I really don't know how I feel about that. You've also got 2 tack talents dedicated to this, which I guess is fine in itself, but I don't know, I just feel like, depending on how you're trying to play this, having those more options feels a little bit better. Also, you've already got triple barrier down here. I want to know how much this duelist really just ran into all of this Rizal madness out here, that they had to make decisions like this. Like, that's crazy to be seeing. All right, next up here, we have, I'm telling you, man, these lists out here, these are really tacked out. These duelists were so frustrated with the meta, like, okay, sure. So I see that we were going with your triple copies of Book of Eclipse in here. I guess being able to have Book be this revolving door, your opponent's playing Rizal, for example, and then they've got, good old Dead Namer set up. Being able to go whoopsie daisy and take care of that allows this entire deck to break his board and do his thing. That's why Book of Eclipse actually is going to be one of your little favorite cards, kind of deal with the meta. Now, I also find this a little bit interesting. This duelist actually was side decking the Abyss Dweller. In a higher competition, Dweller's not gonna feel like the greatest card in the world. Like we're gonna say that, but you do want to make sure that you kind of want to have this card, because it does some stupid loops. I also see that we were, once again, these tack talents ratios. See that we went with the 2-1 here in the main deck, and once again, you're going to notice there's no thrust. There's none. No thrust needed for these lists. Okay. I guess maybe just maximizing on the dimensional barriers. I guess you could get into the dimensional barrier war, and that would be the reason why you would want the revolving door of dimensional barriers, but okay, that's very interesting. All right. Next up here, we have our Voiceless Voice Challenger. Good job to Voiceless Voice out here, overcoming all of the obstacles in this meta. Like, I didn't think I would see this, but this is kind of refreshing, actually. In terms of ratios, I see that we are back on the double Saravis, and we're back on the double Skull Guardian. Actually, having the Saravis here, I think, is fine. You've also got to remember, you are playing the little sub Saravis to toggle into this, and we're also kind of at a point right now in the meta that having the Saravis for that protection is going to be a little bit more important. So I want to put more of an emphasis on this here, that having this be present is going to be actually kind of important. You just want to make sure that you can have the revolving door of hand trap protection, just so that you can kind of do your thing. In terms of this, also, you're not playing this deck without Nadir Servant. Nadir Servant is the deck's lifeblood. And you need to understand this. This card gets you everywhere that you need to be, and then some. And then, of course, hey, look, some extra value down here. You get the chance to see Slayer clean up aisle 9, just to make sure that your opponent is not going to be able to really do anything for you. So, yeah, this looks about what I was kind of expecting for a Voiceless Voice deck, this format. And then, of course, you have our Kashtira Fiendsmith variant. Yes, who needs to maximize on engravers out here when, you know what, 2 enough can get you to where you need to be. You've got to remember with how good Engraver can actually be, you'll be covering your bases. Obviously, you want to be, deploying Kashtira Fenrir's and Unicorns everywhere to set up those disruption options, take away from your opponent's extra deck. But in addition to that, being able to maybe, I guess you got to decide, am I going to try to bait hand traps on this, or am I going to try to bait hand traps on the unicorn side here to, you know, get into things. Shangarira is still going to be a very strong card to deploy and set up those levels of disruption against your opponent. Once again, you also do see we have the 2 tack talents and the 1 thrust in here, just because you want to make sure that you can get into these power cards and actually fully disrupt your opponent. You also do see here Droll and Lockbird coming down here in the side deck, as well, being that very good card. Same thing with this. And then, of course, we're doing what, the 1 Sanctum with the 2-dimensional barriers in here as well. And then, of course, the handyman work of Solemn Jade to kind of clean up some of this. So that wraps up this tournament breakdown. In terms of what you're seeing out here, we actually had some surprises, which is good. You want surprises to keep the meta fresh. You want there to be challengers out here that are aiming to kind of conquer the meta. And that's kind of what we're getting right now. We're getting a lot of good options in this meta, and I like what I'm seeing here. So please, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think, and I will see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.